All right, good morning. It is 8:05 a.m. on Thursday, the 29th of September. Yesterday, you had your Hot 4 or hands-on test number 4 on Chapter 8, so it's time for us to move forward. As of right now, there is nobody joining me, which is totally okay. All right, and I'm going to just go on. So far, we have covered all of Section 1, meaning we have covered chapters, try that again, chapters 1, 2, and 3. From Section 2, we have covered 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we've got 9, 10, and 11 to go. And good morning, Grant. I'm just starting up. And I said so far, we have gone through all of Section 1. And in Section 2, we are through Chapter 8. So the plan today is to go over at least Chapter 9 and probably 9 and 10. It's a heck of a lot to keep going through chapter after chapter after chapter. So probably what I'll do is I'll go through it, like I said, at least 9 today and maybe 9 and 10. And then I will go over chapter 11 on Monday. Tomorrow is our normal Friday lab day. And please remember that the homework, the labs, and the written tests for chapter 8 are due Sunday. Now, surprise to most of you, probably, because I'm always a little lax and fall behind on grading. But other than one or two of you, because I just was doing it this morning, I have graded your chapter 8 hands-on test. What I will do also is I will send out a copy of the test, and you can kind of see where I took off. With people who got like a 95 to 100, and that was quite a few of you, but if you did, I may have hit you on a point here or there where you forgot to rename the form, or you forgot to set your accept or cancel buttons, etc. But by and large, the people who are doing well in the class are doing well in understanding the logic, at least seem to be. Now, there's a few people in the class who have fallen behind or seem like they're having a hard time understanding things. Earlier in the semester, for those of you who are having trouble, I had mentioned to you that I had emailed Mr. Gudmested, my counterpart at the St. Louis campus, and he has a guy, it was Zach somebody or other, who was able to come in and work with people. People have asked since then, well, are there any other tutors? That's the only one that has stepped forward. No one from my afternoon class, so none of my second year students have expressed any interest in tutoring. All right. But I will send out that name and phone number again today. So if you are behind and are looking for a tutor, you can try to contact that person. All right. So with that said, let's jump into chapter 9. What you're going to find in both chapter 9 and chapter 10, and really in chapter 11 as well, is there's going to be bits and pieces in here that we've already gone over. All right. Such as, well, how to format numbers, dates, and times. When we talk about formatting stuff to currency or whatever, we've looked at a lot of that already. All right. And as you'd probably guess, when you do a lot of this stuff, there's more than one way to do it. All right. And why, I mean, why is that even important? Well, it's important to at least expose you to the different ways of doing things. What I try to show people, especially considering with most of you in this class, this is your first class period in the program, in the AWD program here at Rankin. So I try to show you what I consider to be the most intuitive way, the way that makes the most sense to do something. Could I be wrong? Of course, I'm wrong quite often, but that's what I want to get to with you. And again, they talk about using parse and triparse. We've hit on those already. All right, but there will be new things in here as well. So my hope is that between now, possibly now and 9, but if not now and 9:30, that I will finish chapter 9. All right. And then we will go right into chapter 10, because again in there are quite a few things that we've at least started to go over already. And then again Monday we'll go over chapter 11. Now I am still going to, as I've been doing, I'll do a couple problems that will still be due from 9 and 10. There's no homework from 11. It's all on how to use debugging techniques. All right. So I'll still go through next week a couple problems from chapter 9 and from chapter 10. But one of the things that I plan on doing next week, and this will be your pre-test, all right, but it's going to be more expanded because by this point, once we've gone through chapter 11, we're on our way. We're going to jump into in a week or two, you know, into the next section of the book, which is on object-oriented programming. But to make sure that people really understand what we've done in the first 11 chapters, I'm going to have you build, for lack of better words, pretty much an entire payroll system. All right. And if you say, well, what is that? I'll show it to you. I'm in the process of creating it right now. I like to create things before I go and hand them out and have students do them. So we'll talk about that next week. All right. Will we have a test next week? My guess is probably not, just so you know. All right. Now, your homework is due for chapter 8 this week, and I'm going to try to make the homework for 9, 10, and 11. But again, there's no homework for 11. For 9 and 10 due next week, so October 9th. But the test probably won't be until the following week, like the 10th or the 11th or something like that, just so you're aware of this. So let's talk about dates and times, then strings, then formatting. So let's just jump right into it. Now, when you work with dates and times, you've got your choice. You can do one of three things. You can work just with dates, you can work just with times, and you can work with dates and times together. If you create something as a date time and you give it a date, but you don't give it a time, it defaults to midnight. All right. Now, why did they choose that? I don't know, but somebody did. All right. So as it says in here, figure 9.1, which we'll look at in just a second on the next page, presents three ways you can create a date time value. And as it says, first, you can use the new keyword. So that's kind of important because when we get into chapter 12 in a couple weeks, we'll be using the new keyword all over the place. All right. So I already mentioned how if you don't specify a time, it defaults to 12 midnight. You can create a date time value using the parse and try-parse methods. We've used parse and we've used try-parse before, but we've always used them in the context of working with numbers to make sure something is numeric. So we've done like a try-parse, you know, basically an int32 dot try-parse or a decimal dot try-parse or a double dot try-parse. But you can do a date time try-parse as well to make sure that you're formatting a date correctly. And they mention here, when you use parse or try-parse, the date and time you specify must be valid. So we'll look at a couple of situations like that. All right, so let's just jump into this. This probably is amongst the driest stuff that we've covered so far. And what I mean by that with dates and times, a lot of times I've heard people go, well, who really cares about this stuff? Well, you've got to realize that if you are going to go in and, for example, if you are going to write an application, some kind of a business related application for a company, that if it's a company, let's just, I just hit me, like, let's just say that it's Home Depot. All right. And if you write something for Home Depot and you are setting up a system for them where it's, let's say it's a billing system. All right. Well, then you might have a date that the product is meant to ship. You might have a date that the payment is due, etc. So dates and times can be unbelievably relevant. All right. Again, depending on what it is you're trying to do. Now, there are some smarts that are built into here. And what I mean is, if you come in here for the date and leave it blank or put a negative number in, etc., all right, the system will catch things like that and will throw errors. However, let's say that I just fat fingered in here and we're right here where I'm showing 2020. let's say that we put 2220. The system typically won't flag anything like that, but it's 200 years into the future. All right, but it won't because it doesn't, that's not an invalid date. All right, so it is up to you, the programmer, if you want to check to make sure that a year falls within a certain range. All right, for instance, if I was doing a thing where I was trying to figure out people's birthdays, I would imagine that I would try to compare the current year with, maybe I'd even go back 125 years. All right. I mean, if somebody was born in 1900, they'd be 122 right now. And I don't think there is anyone that old. All right. I don't know if there's ever been anyone that old. But the point is, if I went back, let's say to 1897, all right, then somebody could literally be 125 years old. So if they put in a year that was prior to that, or a year more than the current year, I'd have to programmatically put checks like that in there. And that's what I'm getting to in here. Now, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, I think we'll see it in here, but when you're putting in the month, it has to be between 0, 1, and 12. All right, 1 for January, 12 for December, of course, and everything in between. And I also believe that there's things that are put in here. So for instance, if this is January, if I put in here a 0, or if I put in here 32, all right, then they'll catch stuff like that. Basically it'd be a date, some kind of a date exception. There also are things that are built into here, and we're going to see them, I believe, for leap years. All right. For instance, 2020 was a leap year, 2024 will be a leap year, etc. All right. When you are putting in dates, some of the valid formats are shown right here. I'm not even sure if these are all of the valid formats. All right. But when you look at this, how you format the date is going to basically show how it's going to appear on the screen. All right. So, we're used to either using slashes or dashes as they show here. Sometimes you have to put in, I filled out plenty of forms on the internet and other places where they ask for month, day, year, year. All right. And when you do that, they require, so if it's this month, they would require a 09 as opposed to just 9. Now, you may or may not be aware of this, but in many other parts of the world, they put the day first and then the month and then the year. So for instance, today is the 29th. So ours would be like 09 or /29/2022, or just 9/29/20, 22 maybe. But with them, it would be more like 29/9/2020, or 22. And again, it has to do with what's called your locale, LOCALE, and that is basically where in the world you're located. So as they mention here, you can use the date time structure to work with dates and times. All right. You can do it creating a new date time object, and I believe they showed one of those here. So a new date time where you put all the stuff in, or you can come in and try to parse a string and make it into a date time. That one is actually done quite a bit when you come in and you ask a user to literally input things. All right. Now that said, I've also, and maybe you've done this as well, have filled out forms where, or maybe, some kind of a form or something where there's 3 drop-down lists. So you click a down arrow and it's got the numbers 0, 1 through 12. All right, you choose 1, you click the drop-down list next to it, and it's got the numbers 1 to 31. You click a 2 for the month, and then you click the thing for the days, and it's either got 28 if it's a non-leap year, or 29 if it's a leap year, etc. All right, so again, as all they're saying here is there's more than one way to do this. All right. If you want to get the current date and time, notice if you want both the current date and time, you can use now. So it's datetime.now. So in other words, If I did something like this that is shown right here, if I said current date time equals date time dot now, it would say something like 9/29/2022, and then for the time it would be like 8:26:59 or something like that. I guess it's about 8:20. All right. And you can do just today, which will grab you. All right. So today, as it says, will return just the current date. Now they're showing it here with both the date and the time. All right, you can just print out one, but what they're saying here is if you use today, it just defaults the time to midnight. When you go in and you start formatting, and they will show examples here, notice there's a long date string, a short date string, a long time string, and a short time string. There's even more than that, but those are the ones that are probably the most popular. So notice there's the long date. So again, today would be Thursday, comma, September 29th, comma, 2022, where the short we've already mentioned. And you can do similar things with the time. All right, where with a long, you can put in the seconds. Actually, just so you know, when you create a date time object, they may not have even mentioned it in here, but typically it's accurate to 100th of a second. All right. So as it says, the now and today properties are used. We just looked at those. And formatting, as it says, will depend on your computer's regional settings. When you are doing that, typically when you are formatting dates and times, it's grabbing it off your hard drive. In other words, from your system. So mine right now says 8:22 a.m. 9/29/2022. But if somebody had been watching this in another state, let's say, where they had another time zone, it might be more or less than 8:29 or 8:22. All right, how to get information about dates and times? Well, what they're saying here is you can pluck out any bit of that date or any bit of that time that you need. All right. So notice as it says, the date returns the date time portion. Time is automatically set to midnight. The month does just that. The day does just that, etc. All right. This is kind of neat that the fact that there is leap year, and to my knowledge, I could be wrong on this, but I don't think I am. To my knowledge, it used to be in C sharp, you had to write your own leap year function. And it wasn't that it was that hard, but most people are under the wrong assumption that every 4 years is a leap year. That's not true. Because, for example, if for the year 2000, back, and that maybe is before many of you were born, I don't know, but the year 2000 was a leap year. But for a year that ends with 00 like that to be a leap year, it has to be divisible by both 100 and 400. So if any of you make it, and hopefully you do, 78 years from now up to the year 2100, don't think I'll be here, but up to the year 2100, in that year will not be a leap year, because although it is divisible by 100, it is not evenly divisible by 400. Okay, and there's some examples here where it grabs the different things. Okay, and it's again, they show you from 130, 2020, or 2020 how you could pluck out again the individual pieces. All right. And as it says there, well, there's an example. Code that uses the day of the week for doing what? For determining whether or not, all right, it's a Saturday or a Sunday, as an example. And again, we're going to look at some of this stuff when we go through one or two of the labs and or homeworks. Performing operations on dates and times. Well, notice the only thing that you can basically do with dates is add and subtract. The only thing you can do with time is pretty much the same thing. All right. In other words, running a multiplication on a date or a divide on a date or a modulo on a date is senseless. But if I gave you that example before that if, for example, you worked for Home Depot, all right, and every time somebody placed an order, payment was due within, let's say, 30 days of when the order was placed. You could do an add days then and add 30. So the date that the order was shipped, you would add 30 to that, and that would become the date that payment was due, or something like that. And again, as shown here, you can do that with days, you can do that with months, years, hours, minutes, and seconds. Now, kind of important here, because down near the bottom here, it says add time span. And a time span is kind of a weird little thing to work with. And I don't know how much we're going to work with it or look at it here, but a time span is used a lot in database operations. When you set up a time, quite often you make it of type time span. So we'll revisit that, no pun intended, but at a later time. All right. And again, you can subtract two dates. All right. The biggest problem people usually have when they subtract one date from another is they put the wrong date first. So again, for instance, if I wanted to know how old I was and I did all that stuff, I'd have to take the current year and subtract from it the year I was born, etc. All right, so again, they've got some operations that you can use on this stuff. All right, and we're probably going to do little to nothing with this. But again, if you wanted to find out how many days there were until Christmas, for example, you could use something where you could do a date subtract and subtract 12/25, 2023 from, I'm sorry, take 12/25, 2023 and subtract from that 9/29. It should have been 2022, but you get the idea. So there's a lot of ways like that that these can be used. And again, as it says, a time span represents a period of time stored as ticks. Literally, think of it as clock ticks. All right. And it does say there, in addition to the time methods, you can use some of the relational operators basically. Plus, minus, you can check it to see if a date is equal to a certain date or not equal, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to a certain date. All right. That's pretty much that. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm trying to be complete here. And that is, if I go in and I literally just Google right here, C# date time, something like that. Either the first one to come up or one of the first ones to come up will be from our Microsoft documentation. All right. And I mean, it is in here. I'm not sure if this is the one I'm looking for or not, but you can go in there and you can basically find out whatever it is you need to find out. The reason I bring that up is the thing we're going to talk about next is not date time, but it's strings. All right. And again, you'll notice again, the first thing we get here, and it looks like it's learnmicrosoft.com now, but the C#, notice there's string and string literals. This is always going to be your final go-to for anything when you've got a question on how to do something, or you're working on it yourself and you can't get a hold of me or a tutor or somebody else. All right. One thing about this, I may have said this before, I may not have. I always find humor in this because I oftentimes find humor in things that are maybe not even really funny. But a lot of times what Microsoft will do is in this example right here, is they will give you code. All right. Why is that funny? It's funny because not always, but on occasion, the code doesn't work. So they put code out there. And I've even done that where I've contacted them and I said, hey, did you know your code doesn't work? And they're like, yeah, occasionally we're going to put something out there that maybe hasn't been tested or whatever. And okay, fine. All right. So let's talk about working with strings. They give you a pretty good example right here of when that can be important. All right. What you find quite often when you work with a database, and I know we're not going to work in databases for a month or more yet, but quite often what you find is when people want to store a phone number. So let's say my phone number was I'll give you my office number. It's 314-286-3675, I believe. I don't know. I'm never in the office anymore. But quite often, if you wanted to store that into a database, you would remove the hyphens. And people are used to either putting number, hyphen, number, hyphen, number, or putting the area code number inside a parens, then a space, then number slash number. Well, if you wanted to go and pull out just the 10 digits, there are different string functions that you can use on this. We've already started to use some of the string functions already. You're used to this, and what I mean by that is, for example, on the test that you just took, all right, you were told to make case insensitive searches. So you would run the two upper, and people by and large did that, did it just fine. So properties and methods of the string class. All right, let's take a look at some of them. This is not an exhaustive list. All right, we've used the length property before, but we've used it with arrays to see how many elements are in an array. If I've got a string that says, now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of their party, and I run the length function on that string, it'll probably come back with 40 or 50, or how many characters are in that string I just gave it. All right, so you can use length, but when you use it on a single string, it returns the number of characters that are in that string, including any blank characters before, after, or inside of the string. Starts with and ends with, notice they're both Boolean to see if a string starts with something or ends with something. The ones that people oftentimes seem to have the most problems with are index of and last index of. And you'll notice here with index of, returns an integer that represents the position of the first occurrence of the specified. So if you're looking for something, it'll tell you, and you're looking through a string like that, and you give it a start index. If you don't give it any index there, if you just give it index of with a string, it starts at the beginning. And it returns the location of where that string begins. And remember, it starts at location 0. So if that was at the start of the string, so if I was, if it was, now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of their party, and I was looking for now, which is right at the beginning, it would come back with a 0. All right. Now, if it was now is the time, it used to be now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their party, but because we're politically correct today, which we should be, it's now is the time for all good people. Well, if I looked for men in that string, it may not be there anymore. So if you look for something within a string and it's not there, all right, it returns -1. Okay. So index of finds the first occurrence, last index of finds the last occurrence. All right. So insert allows you, as it says, returns a string with a specified position, insert it at the beginning. So if you want to be able to insert something, as an example, what if I had everybody's first name and last name, and then later I got all of your middle names, and we're going to assume for a second everybody has a middle name. And I could use the insert so that if I wanted to, maybe in a database or whatever, or someplace I had just first name and last name, I could insert the middle name in the middle if I wanted to do that. That's probably a pretty crummy example. Pad left and pad right. All right. I remember watching a movie a few years ago where somebody was given a check, and the check had in it a $sign, and then it had a bunch of blank spaces, and then it had like $2.46. And the person, I mean, this was quite a few years ago, it was much cruder than it is today, but the person basically put that check into a printer and changed it so that rather than it being like $2.36, they made it like $992.36. Well, quite often today, if you get a check, especially a check for a small amount, it might say something like $, asterisk, 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 2.36. All right. So why am I telling you that? Because you're padding there. In that case, you'd be padding with asterisks. You can pad from the left or you can pad from the right. Quite often when people use padding, the reason that they use padding is they want columns to line up with one another, the values in there, so it looks nice. All right, so again, you can either pad to the left or you can pad to the right. Remove, as it says, allows you to remove characters. Replace allows you to replace different characters. Now, what's kind of important in here is to understand the distinction between using index of and using substring. Index of is designed to look from the start of a string, all right, and give you a number back where your string starts from. Substring allows you to look through a string and determine whether or not that string actually holds a substring. So as it says, it returns the string that starts at the specified position and has the specified length. So again, if I did a substring on now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of their party, and maybe I made it about 6 or 7 long, I'd get something like now is. All right. The two lower and the two upper we've used already. The trim I've spoken about, and I've used it on occasion in some of my programs where it removes leading and trailing blank spaces. But if I have in there now is the time and I've got a blank space between now and is, etc., it doesn't remove those blank spaces. It only removes leading and trailing spaces. The last one that's in there is an interesting one, and it's split. Because if I literally come in and say now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of their party, if I put that into a string and then I run a split on it based on the blank spaces, now the word now becomes array element 0, is becomes the array element 1, becomes the array element 2, etc. And the opposite of split is basically join. All right, so when you split, it's also known as an explode type of function because you're taking one thing and exploding it into a lot of other things. Whereas when you use the join, and they don't even talk about join in here, I guess, but when you use join, it's an implode type of method. So you're taking a bunch of stuff and you're joining it together so it's one unit. Finally, as they say right here, when you do this, it says you can use an index to access each character in a string. 0 is always the first element. So if I want to use the word, let's use my name here, Jeff. All right. If I wanted to, the J would be a string element 0. The E would be a string element 1. The first F would be a string element 2. The second F would be a string element 3, etc. All right, so they're going to give you some code examples that work with these things, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time because hopefully, at least, hopefully, the stuff that's in here is at least fairly self-evident as far as what we're doing in here. All right, and what do I mean by that? Well, you've got a string with A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You're telling it to grab the 0th character, which would be A, and then you tell it to grab character 1, which would be B. All right. Here is what I mentioned before, that if you want to be able to loop through each character that's in a string, all right, is this something you'd use often? Probably not, but it's something that's available for you if you do need to use it. Then we've got code that uses a for each loop to access each character. All right, so here they're just printing it out a character at a time, so they're using a old-fashioned for loop, but here they want to go in and work with each character at a time. Now, how could that be important? Well, what I'm going to tell you is not that big of a thing anymore, but it used to be. There used to be a lot of demand for programmers who could go in, for example, to a database, and where a lot of times people put in first names and last names. Sometimes they used all caps, sometimes all lowercase, sometimes mixed case. And they wanted people to go in there and basically fix it so that everything that was put in there was put in pretty much the same kind of way. All right. So again, this is a good page because they show you the starts with, they show you the ends with, starts with, well, notice, starts with ABC. All right. Well, and ends with ABC. So it says bool starts with ABC, chars, and what was chars? Chars was over here. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So yeah, it's true that it starts with ABC, but since it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it doesn't end with an ABC. So the first one returns true, the second one returns false. And again, you can go through the different examples in here and hopefully at least most of them make sense. The other one that we really haven't said much about is the one on the bottom of the page here. And that's the one that says code that copies one string to another. All right. So if I do this, it literally makes a copy. It's not that we've got two things that refer to the same string. No, we've got two different strings. They could both have in them to start with the value ABC. But if I change the value of the second one to DEF, it changes S2 to DEF. S1 does not change. And then there's yet even more examples. So what they're trying to do here is they're being more complete, and they're giving you longer, more extensive examples as you go on your way through here. All right. So next is the parse and the try-parse. And again, as already mentioned, we've talked about these already. All right. It says in chapter 4, you learn how to use parse and try-parse. You also learn that when you convert a string to a numeric type, these methods only recognize standard numeric characters. It says now you learn how to use parse and try-parse methods to validate a numeric entry by specifying the exact characters you want it to allow. All right. Now, often when you work with this, all right, I'm going to use a word that's not really relevant here, but it is in other languages. What this is typically called when you work with this stuff is it's typically referred to as regular expression handling. Sometimes regular expression is just, it's a word I'm looking for. Basically, it's regex, R-E-G-E-X. But if you look at the stuff in here, and again, what's kind of neat about this is you can set up in code to only allow certain things to be accepted. So for instance, allow currency symbol, that'd be any digit and a dollar sign. Okay, and you can read the rest of them yourselves. I don't want to go on and on. We've looked at the currency one already because when we use the C in our toString, that's what it does, is it sets it up for a currency method. But what they're saying here is when you do a try parse or a parse, as they show you here in these examples, you can be even much more restrictive than we have been. When we've done a try parse, if we say in there, for example, enter how much you make an hour, and if you put a dollar sign 15.00 and you try to do a direct parse or a try parse on that to a decimal, it's going to fail because of the dollar sign. But you can come in here and tell it to allow, all right, like up here, allow the currency symbols. All right. So again, I guess that can be kind of important. So it says by default, commas, a decimal point, leading and trailing spaces are allowed in a decimal value when you use the parse or try parse. Again, What's not allowed is the $sign. Third bullet down says to indicate the characters that are allowed, you can use the members of the number styles in numeration. And I'm not even going to lie to you. I don't know if I've ever used these in anything. All right. The parse and try-parse method remove any of these specified characters from a string that are not allowed by the numeric type before the value is assigned to that data type. When you use try-parse, you have to include a format provider. In other words, what kind of parsing are you trying to do? Nullable reference types. This is probably, in fact, let's just go back a page here. This is probably amongst the hardest things in this chapter. We've talked before, a little bit at least, about nulls. Null means unknown. I may have given you this example, all right, earlier in the semester. I don't remember. But if you walk into a classroom and it's your first day of class and you've never had another class at Rankin before, and the teacher comes up to you and says, "Hey, what's your GPA?" And you go, "I don't have one." And if the teacher says, "Why?" and you go, "Because this is my first day here." Well, then you're right, you don't have one. So your GPA is null. It's unknown at the current time. It's not a zero, because if your GPA was a zero, people would at least think, that there's some kind of a problem or whatever. All right. Oh, okay, Grant, I guess you're in the waiting room. Sorry about that. All right, Grant, hopefully you're back in and you weren't out too long. Okay. All right. So what I just got into is talking about nullable, and the example that I gave was, again, if you walk into a classroom on the first day, you have no grade point average. All right. You haven't done anything to get a grade yet, but you don't have a grade point average of zero. It's just unknown. So sometimes, for instance, if I were to hire somebody, let's say that I'm an HR person and I interview you, and boy, you've impressed me. I don't know where you're going to work yet, but you've really impressed me. So I hire you. But if somebody says, "What department do you work in?" you don't know yet. So your department name would be null. So again, null is unknown. All right. So it says they talk in here about using stuff that is nullable. And the reason that this can be important is usually with not every type of data, but with many data types in C#, if you want to basically say, "Hey, I don't know what it is," you can set it to null. Now, it doesn't always work. For example, typically, you with numbers, people say, "Oh, I'll just set it to zero." There's a difference again between zero and null. All right. There's really no difference between null and the empty string, at least in my opinion. So it says if you want to enable nullable reference types, you got to go through and do a big song and dance. All right. But by sitting there and doing this, as it says, going into the Solution Explorer, right mouse clicking on the project name and selecting properties, select the build category, and for the nullable dropdown, select enable. Then what you can do is you can set things to null, probably a lot more than you can without doing that. So as it says there, common situations when warnings are displayed. I'm not going to read those to you. You can take a look at them. All right. One thing you typically don't ever want to do is if you've got something that is set to null, you don't want to do things like try to assign it to a different variable. All right. You also don't want to try to print it out if something is null. All right. So as it says there, by default, reference types can contain null values. All right. And usually when you work with null values in here someplace, you'll notice that, for instance, right here, they're using the exclamation point. There they're using the question mark. What's the difference? They're using the question mark when the thing appears on the left-hand side of an equal sign. They're using the exclamation point when the thing appears on the right-hand side of an equal sign. Again, we're going to do little to nothing with that. All right. Now, the next thing that's in here, you may or may not find confusing with a string builder. All right. If I go in and I create a string variable and I say string first name equals double quote Jeff double quote. All right. What that means is that's created a new string. So somewhere in memory, I don't know where, I have no control over that, but somewhere in the computer's memory, it's going to put aside some locations that'll hold the 0 and 1 combinations that make up J and E and F and F. If later on I change my name from Jeff to Jeffrey, it doesn't just go to where it is in memory and add on to that an R and an E and a Y. It doesn't do that. Strings are what are known as being immutable. So once you create a string and you reassign the value that you originally used for that string, it gets reassigned, but it gets reassigned somewhere else in memory. Not only that, the system leaves or basically marks that memory location that used to have Jeff in it, that is now Jeffrey. And what happens is the operating system sooner or later will free up that memory. Now, what if you don't want to do that? What if you want to build a string by combining together? So what if I want to create a string that is basically a first name and then a middle name and then a last name? Well, I could create 3 strings, put Jeffrey into the first one, put Paul into the second one, put Scott into the third one, and then create another string where I said it's equal to first name plus a blank space plus middle name plus a blank space plus last name. I could do that and it would work. But if I want to build things in real time as I'm creating them, I can use what's called a string builder. Unlike a string, which is immutable, a string builder is mutable, which means that you can change what's been added to it as the program is running. It's sort of like the difference between an array that we talked about in the last chapter, which is a fixed size, and an array list, all right, where you can add and delete, and you can make the size of the list bigger and smaller as the program goes on. So if you use the string builder, here's some of the stuff that you can use with it. All right. And again, you will probably typically notice in here with a string builder, if you make this 16, I believe, just like we talked about with some of the stuff earlier, if you reach 16, it automatically doubles to 32. All right. So they say right here, unlike string objects, again, string builder objects are mutable, which means they can be changed while the program's running. The capacity is the amount of memory that's allocated. So it's that number that we put in, like right here, where there's that 10. It's increased automatically whenever necessary. If you don't put a number in there, it defaults to 16. I think it keeps doubling every time it gets filled up. All right. Formatting numbers. All right. Formatting numbers. We've looked at some of this stuff. I've used the N already. You can use N in upper or lowercase to format the number of numbers you want, but I've usually done it like an N2. All right. For things like, 2 decimal places. And the standard ones are shown right here in the chart. Okay. There's some formatting codes that you can use. So if I used a 0 placeholder and I put in 000 pound sign, comma, or I'm sorry, period, pound sign. If I had a number like 99, it would put in 0000099.99. We don't use that much here. It's used in a lot of other languages. In the past, I've taught Java, and Java uses that quite a bit when you are formatting things. Now, what is new here, what we have never talked about, to my knowledge, is what you see right here. So they're using string.format, and this is what looks a little weird. All right. This 0:C that they put in parentheses and inside of double quotes and inside of braces, the 0 means how many things are we trying to format? There's only one here. The C means how do you want to format it? It's the currency. And you might look at that and go, why didn't they just use the number dot toString with a C? You can. But they're showing you in here other ways that you can format. In the past, I've gone over this and sometimes even gone over it in a lot of depth and breadth of coverage. And people have said to me later, do we have to use this? And I'll say no. And they're like, then why did I even have to learn it? Because it's another thing that's available to you. All right. And again, they give you some examples in here. All right. Not only can you format numeric values as they show right here, you can format date values, you can format time values. All right. This one's interesting. They talk about interpolated strings. All right. Interpolated strings mean something different in different programming languages. What do I mean? The way that you do an interpolation in JavaScript is not the same way you do an interpolation in C sharp. What do I mean? Let's look at an example. Right here. If I say string balance equals this, again, we could have said, we could have put 1234.56 inside of parentheses and then done a dot toString C for currency. But this is another way of doing it. So when you interpolate in C sharp, it's the $sign, then in parentheses and in curly braces, what it is you want to interpolate and how you want to interpolate it. I would just tell you if that doesn't make sense, then don't do it that way. As I've told you previously, I try to come up with a way of doing things that I consider to be the most intuitive. All right. But you can use interpolated expressions. And let me just tell you that when we get into JavaScript, and especially the more advanced JavaScript class, you use string interpolation all the time. And that's it for this chapter. I didn't know, again, how long it would take. So we're going to take a break in just a moment. And then when we come back, we will go over chapter 10, which is about the same size as this chapter was, around 30 pages. We're going to look at a few more controls we haven't looked at yet. We're going to look at how we can have more than one form in a project. And the message box stuff we'll spend almost no time on because we already know what message boxes are. Now, I did nothing in this chapter, nothing, where I actually went out and wrote any code. I will in this next one so I can demonstrate combo boxes, list boxes, check boxes, radio buttons, etc. When we get to the tab order, I'll spend almost no time on it because you already know how to set the tab order. And then when we get to multi-form projects, I will spend some time on that as well. All right. It is 9 o'clock. Let's just take 10 and come back, please. I got to get a drink. So let's come back at 9:10. I will see you then. All right, so it is 9:10. Again, I'm going to go over chapter 10 right now, but I think that for chapter 11, I'll wait till Monday and we'll go through it and we'll take a look at some examples of debugging at that time as well. So what I want to do for the rest of the period today is I want to go over chapter 10, and then afterwards I want to very quickly bring up the homeworks that will be due, the homework and the labs that will be due for chapters 9 and 10, and start to go through those with you. I'm not going to write anything for them, but just to make sure everybody knows what they are. And again, those will be due Sunday, October 9th. Okay, so chapter 10, which is entitled More Skills for Working with Windows Forms and Controls. All right, how to work with controls. So we're going to be introduced here to combo boxes, list boxes, and we've looked at these a little, but not much. Check boxes, which we haven't really worked with at all. Radio buttons, which we haven't really worked with at all. Group boxes, which I probably have shown you, but we haven't done much with them. Tab order, we already know. All right, how to get information you need for using a control, we'll look at that. Then what I'm going to do for the first time is I'm going to build a very, very, very simple project for you. And then I'm going to rebuild it. All right. And at first, it's going to have only one form. And then we're going to add 3 more forms so you can see how to jump from form to form. All right. And then they talk about the message box class, which again, we'll spend almost no time on because we've already done this. And we'll take a look at this payment application. All right, so let's take a look first, the first 10 or 12 pages at the different controls that are in here. I did start up a session and I've got a brand new blank project in here, and I'm going to put some of these in here so we can take a look at them. All right, virtually all of the work we've done so far, virtually, and I know what, like I said, virtually, we've used labels, we've used text boxes, and we've used buttons, well, and forms, of course. But those are pretty much it for the controls that we've used in a lot of depth and breadth of coverage. So this chapter is going to introduce, as it says, 5 more controls. All right. Combo box, a list box, a group box, a radio button, and a check box. So let's take a look at them on the next page here. They're all here. All right. Let's just start at the top. Now, you can see the word billing up here. And when you look, there is a box around this. All right. Pretty much a group box type of thing that's around there. And oftentimes, especially when you've got 2 things that go together like 2 radio buttons, you'll put them in a box like that. What you see quite often, this example is totally fine. All right. But a lot of times, it used to be at least where you'd see gender here and you'd have male, female, or female, male. It doesn't matter. I know today with the way our political correctness is, there is considered to be more than 2 different types of genders. But I'm just saying in the standard way of doing it. And if you've never heard the story before, and I'll keep it short and sweet, radio buttons are taken from the old days where if you had an older car that had an AM radio in it, all right, that the radio would have like 5 buttons on it that you could pre-program. And when you clicked on one of the buttons, it went from one station to the other. Well, radio buttons here are the same way. They're used for what are referred to as mutually exclusive choices. So in other words, in the example shown here, your billing type can be either credit card or bill customer. It cannot be both. If you choose credit card like they've done here, then where they've got the credit card type in this list box that says Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, it becomes active. But if you chose bill customer, you would not see either it would be grayed out, meaning it wasn't enabled, or it would be invisible depending on how you did it. All right. But if you chose bill customer, credit card type doesn't make sense. Neither does credit card number. So what's new here? Again, this group box, these two radio buttons. If I click here, that one then gets the blackness inside of the dot, and that goes away there. So only one of these can be chosen at a time. This is a list box right here. What's important about a list box? A lot of times with list boxes, they're just used to list things, but sometimes they're allowed, they're put out there so you can choose things. And when you choose them, you can set it up by default. You can only choose one thing in a list box, but there's a multi-line option in there where you can choose more than one thing if you want to. And then down towards the bottom where you see these select a month and select a year, those are combo boxes, and really they're known also as drop-down lists. So if you click on one of those, all right, if you click on one of those, for instance, if you do the month, depending on how you set it up, it would either be the words January through December, or the month number is 0, 1, or 1 through 12. All right. And then finally, there's a checkbox on the end. Checkboxes can either be chosen or not chosen. All right. So checkboxes have what's called a checked property. And I believe radio buttons have the same properties. The difference again between a radio button and a checkbox is if I had here, and I wouldn't do it like this, but let's say that I had a thing here like we have in here, but it said gender and it had a checkbox for male and a checkbox for female. In that case, you could check neither, either one, or both. So in that case, it really wouldn't make a lot of sense. So as they mentioned down below here, a combo box, again, that's the select a month and select a year, lets the user select an option from a drop-down list. All right, it also can let you enter text into the text box portion, depending on how you set it up. So in this case, for the months, I would only want it to be 1 through 12 or January through December, but I wouldn't want the user to be able to enter his or her own month in there where they made something up. All right. But sometimes you might want to let the user enter another choice that's not shown in the list. Okay. A list box, as we already seen right there, as it says, it allows the user to select one or more options from a list of items. If the list box contains more than can be displayed at any time, it'll automatically add a scroll bar. Radio buttons, again, for mutually exclusive choices. Group boxes to group together related controls. And check boxes to allow you to select or deselect something. All right. So let's go over this, working with these, and then we'll go and actually bring up a code example and look at some of the stuff that's in here. So the first one they'll talk about in here is the combo box. And the combo box has something called a drop-down style property that you can set either in code or from the properties window. Most often when people set it, you set it in the properties window. But if some of the stuff in here that's important, selected index. All right. If you have nothing selected in your dropdown, the selected index is -1. If you've got the first item, so let's say I had a list of the 12 months. All right. So if I selected January, it would literally be 0 in that case. So 0 is the first element. And if nothing is selected again, it's -1. That's the index. Index like in array index that we just used. If you want the value that's there, it's selected item. All right. I don't think I use text much, but one thing that's kind of cool is that sorted that's in there. If you set sorted to true, as you add things to the dropdown, they automatically become sorted in an ascending order. All right. Items is the the entire collection. It's everything you've got in the combo box or everything you've got in the list box. The style again is for the combo box. And as it says, most often, but not always, but most often you'll set it to drop down list. We're going to look at that in just a moment. Then finally, the selection mode, whereas if it's set to 1, that means you can only select one item at a time. If it's multi-simple or multi-extended, I think simple means you can select more than one, but they have to be connected to one another, and extended means you can do more than one and they don't have to be connected directly to one another. All right. There's a selected index changed and a text changed. So when you go from one element in a combo box to another, or one element from a list box to another, you can put code in there. The key one that's in here, in my opinion, is this items collection, because it allows you to do all sorts of different stuff. All right. So let's see. They've got some code examples in here. Rather than there's nothing wrong with theirs. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my share. I'm going to go into Visual Studio. And hopefully you can see on your screen right now, Grant, tell me if you can't. You see the form that I made in yellow right here. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to add a couple of these things. All right. Now with a list box, let's do that one first. There it is. If I were to run this program now, I'm not going to, but if I did, it would still show, but there'd be nothing in there. But you'll notice if I go off to the side here in my properties window, there's a thing called items. And I've got my choice. I'm going to show this to you two ways. If I click where it says collection right there, I get an ellipsis, 3 dots. If I click on the ellipsis, it gives me this. So I'm going to put in here every member of my family. So there's Jeff, there's Sandy, there's Taylor, there's Mackenzie, and there's Chloe. Why am I showing you that? There's a reason if you give me just a second. Now, if I click OK, they're in there. And I can do the same kind of thing that we've done before. In other words, I can go in so you can see them, and I can change the size here so it's 20 and make it bold and make it Arial, etc., and click. And you can see all that stuff that's in there right now. All right, I can do that, and that's totally fine. So if I run this right now, this has been pre-populated. Okay, and I can click here, but notice if I try to click someplace else, I can't sit there and actually click on more than one. I can't try holding down on Control and clicking or Shift and clicking as an example. But if I click in here and I choose, I don't remember the name now, so let me jump back into the book for just a second. It's selection mode. So if I come back in here and on this thing, if I find selection mode, and it's set to 1 right now, but if I set it to multi-simple, now I can click on here. So when the program runs, I can click on there. If I hold down on Shift, I can click there too. So I can click things that are not connected. That's the selection mode. Is that important? No. I'm just trying to show you in here what this is. Now, as far as what's in here, as far as the stuff that's in here, it's not in any kind of order. I think you'd agree with that. But if I come down to where it says sorted in my properties here, and I double click on that and make it true, now my list is in sorted order. All right. If I wanted to do that, and if I were to come in here, and I'm going to just very quickly add 2 more people into here. They're not my family, but it doesn't matter. So I'm going to come down again into items, and I'm going to put in here at the end, I'll put in here Zoe and Adam. And you'll notice when I do that and I click OK, all right, that Adam goes right to the top and Zoe is right at the bottom. All right, that's if you've got this sorted in there, if that is set. All right, let's see if I've missed anything that's worth talking about. So we'll look at the selected index and the selected item. All right, so I'm going to run this, but I'm going to add a little bit of code here right now. And I'm just going to put in here I don't want it in the load event, but it won't hurt anything. So let's put it in here. So if the index changes, I'm going to just put a message box in here. message box.show, and it's going to say the current index is, and I will add that, so plus the list box, which I didn't rename, so it's just list box 1 dot selected index. All right, so it'll say that, and then I'm going to add to that, and I'm going to say the current item is, okay, and got to give it a heading, or I'm going to get an error here. So let's give it a title, and I'll just say list box info. And again, I'll just add in here a button that'll have OK on it. And this is not an error, so this is all right. So some information. So all I'm doing is I'm trying to print out the selected index and the selected item. All right. Hopefully it'll work out just fine. So I'm going to run this. Okay. Now notice if I click me, it says the current index is 2012, and the current item is Jeff. All right. If I do it again and click on Adam, now the current index is 0, and the selected item is Adam. And if I do it one more time and choose Taylor, now the current index, it says, oh, it didn't change it. All right. I have to click off of here, evidently. Now it says it. Now nothing is changed, nothing is chosen right now. So it says the current index is -1, and the current item is, and it's blank. But if I come in here and choose any one now, it gets reset. All right, and that pretty much, let me stop the run here. And this pretty much works the same way. If I come in here, and I'm going to do this right now, I'm going to come in and add a combo box right there. All right, so again, I can come in here just like we did with the list box. All right, I can come in here, and with this combo box here, I can go down and find items, click on the collection, and again, put in Jeff, Sandy, Taylor, Mackenzie. Let's put 5 different names in here. So Bob, Mary, Ben, Cindy, and Ralph. All right, I'm just going to made that up. It doesn't mean anything. You'll notice now if I do this and click on it, nothing happens. Nothing happened. We're going to put some code in there in a minute. But if I run this and I click the down arrow, my names are in there. They don't show very well. So let's do like we did before. Let's change the size of what's in there. So I'm going to click on here. I'm going to, as we always do, just go over to font, change that like we've been doing to 20, bold and Arial. That should be plenty big. And then run it again. And now you'll notice it didn't change it. I'll have to double check that, but it should have. Don't know what I did wrong. Oh, I have the combo box. Well, maybe I didn't. Yeah, it did not change it though. So let's see one more time. 20, bold, Arial. Yep, it made it bigger, so it changed it. So now my names are in there. And just like we did before, if I click on this and I go down, there again is a sorted property. So if I set it to true, run it again, now it is in alphabetical order. All right. And again, as we did it previously, I'm going to come in here. All right. And I'm going to grab this message box that we just put in there. Over. This over. All right, so I'm going to grab that message box. I'm going to put it in here, but instead of the message box, now it's going to say combo box 1 for that and for this. All right, and if I run this again, what you're going to notice is just like we did before, when I choose Ben, it again says the current index is 0, the current item is Ben. Now, if I do this, nothing's happening yet, but technically it is -1 here. All right, if I go down to Ralph, again, current index is 4, the current item is Ralph. So you can see there's a lot of symmetry between using a combo box and using a list box, that many of the properties for these are very, very, very similar in nature. So let me change my share again and go back to the book. Now, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the examples that the author gives here. I like to be able to show you something that's a little more, I don't know if you'd even call it intuitive. I could have made this, that probably would have been better to use their example. So select a month, and then, so select a month becomes 0. January is now 1, February is now 2, through December, which is now 12. And then notice if I do this, I can add them all to the combo box by using a for each statement. I'm actually going to do that. I think you understand exactly what's happening, but I'm going to do it because that's a little more natural way. So I'm going to come in here and say string bracket months equal, we won't put all 12 of them in. All right, but we'll put in here, select a month. We'll just put in the first 3 months. Then we'll put in January, February, and March.
Swap your screen share when you get the chance.
Okay. All I'm doing right now, just so you know, all I'm doing in here is I'm just putting it into a very, just putting it into Notepad. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back into my actual code in just a moment. I want to basically replicate this one right here.
Thank you.
All right, then I want a for each. So what I'm going to do is quickly switch back again to my code. And we'll use the combo box, but I'm going to remove all those values that were in there. So I'm going to jump over to my, right here, I'm jumping over to the items. I'm going to click on that again, and I'm going to remove every item from the collection. So now it's empty. Just to prove that, if I run it, there's nothing in there right now. But I'm going to go into my form load event by double clicking on this, and I'm going to paste this in from the book, except I didn't put in all 12 months. All right, so I've got here string bracket months. It's giving me an error, but we'll fix that in just a second. That should be a curly. And that fixed all my errors. So all I did was string bracket. So we've got to select a month, put these all out there so you can see everything. All right. So now what should happen is when I run this program and I go to the drop down, that should be element 0, element 1, element 2, element 3. And this is how you can add things So the name of the combo box dot items dot add, and then what do you want to add? And you'll notice in here, we did a for each, and this is a variable we're making up right here. It's called month. But we want it to go through everything that's in months. So again, if I save this and run it, you may not even be able to see my runs. It's no biggie. But now what's in there, oh, it's set to sorted. So it actually comes out, because I had it set to sorted, it comes out to select a month is now at the bottom. So it had February, January, March, select a month. So I'd want to come out there, go back into my code here, into my properties window, and reset the sorted property on there so it is set to false. Now when I run it, I've got select a month, January, February, and March. All right, just so you see this, that I'm not lying or anything. So that's what's in there now. Right now, that index is set to -1 because nothing is selected. All right, now it's set to 1, and you can see, or to 0 rather, it says 0, and it says select the month, 1, January, etc. You get the idea. The reason that this is somewhat important is if I was going to make a list of all 50 states, probably what I would do would be at the top, choose select the state, and then list all 50 of them. All right. Okay. Like I said, I feel like it's easier for people to understand when you see examples rather than just code in the book. All right. So they've got a ton of examples in here. I'm not going to go through any more of them. I think we've gone through enough of them. All right. So let's look at checkboxes and radio buttons. So let me jump back again into the code. And I'll leave these here, but I'm going to add a group box first of all. So I'm going to find a group box control. It's right there. Bring it in. There's my group box. Okay. And sometimes I'll even, just like I do with labels on a form, I'll make the group box a little darker color so that it shows. There you go. You can give this a title. So I can go down to where it's got text, and I'm just going to type in here, gender. All right. And again, I can come in here just like we have been doing, change the size and the font style and the font type. All right, so now it says gender, and now I'm going to go in and drag into here 2 radio buttons. There's one. Okay, I'll make this a little wider here. And then underneath it, that will just copy it. So there's 2. All right. So I'm just going to come in here. Typically with radio buttons, you preface them with rad. So I'm going to call this rad female. And I'm going to put the text in there to female. And this one will be, the text will be male, and it will be rad male. Usually for a group box like this, I preface it with GRP. And this one will be GRP gender. All right. So you'll notice if I click on either one of these, okay, the different properties that it has. There's no items in here like we had before, because this is a collection and this is a collection. This is an individual value. All right. So there are values that are in here. So let's take a look. So again, I will just come in here and I will go here. So notice it's rad female check changed. So I'm going to say here, if rad female dot checked, I'm going to put in here oops, not there. I'll put in a message box in here. Just grab my message box from here. And we'll just say the current gender is, all right. And now what you'll notice is some of this stuff won't make much sense anymore. All right, so let me get down to here. And I'm going to say rad female dot, and this is the stuff we have. All right, it's totally different from the stuff we had before. All right, so we got checked, changed. We're going to show you a couple of those in a minute, but we don't even care. I'm just going to say the current gender is, all right, so rad female, I don't know if there's a dot text in there or not, dot text. All right, and here we're going to say female. All right, and now I'm going to say else if, and let me just copy all of this. If rad male got checked, then we're going to say the current, whoops, the current is, and it's going to be male. All right, that should work. So let me do a file save all and run it. All right, we've got those up now. Let me change my share so you can see it in action, so to speak. All right, so if I click on female, the current gender is female. If I click on male, it changes to the current gender. Oh, I think I didn't change. Let's see. Let's double check. Did you get kicked out again, Grant?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, I heard some weird beep that I don't know. Okay, that's fine. I just, like I said, I heard a weird beep that I don't normally hear, so. That should have said rad male right there. Right, so let me run it again. And you'll notice nothing is selected right now. If I click here, it says the current gender is female. If I click here, it says the current gender is male. Oftentimes what you will do when you are writing code like this is you will pre-populate. You will have something checked by default. All right, try that again. So what I'm telling you is quite often what you will see in here, if I can get my stuff together here, is people will come in and in here, inside of form load, they will say something like rad female dot checked. Let's try that again. Dot checked equal true. Now, if I run the program, and I'm not going to go back and show it to you, but the female one is automatically checked. And the reason for doing that is if you pre-populate something in a checkbox, I'm sorry, in a radio button, so in a group of radio buttons, then one will always be chosen. You never have to worry about checking for it being empty, because once one is chosen, one is always chosen. Okay, let me add into this. Okay, we will put in here a couple check boxes. I'll add one here, and I'll add another one right next to it. Again, I'm going to make these bigger so that they resonate on the screen. Right there they are. And I'm just going to, I don't know, this one I'll put down CB for checkbox, and I'm going to put in here email and I'll put the word email on there. Oops. And the other one, I will put CB text. And it would be more or less, how do you want to hear from us? All right. Do you want us to text you? Do you want us to email you? We could add phone, etc. But the idea is when this program is running, when the program runs, you can have neither one of these checked, either one checked, or both checked. All right. So where I use things like that typically is, let's say that I was writing some kind of a form for people for possible employment, and I might put in here first shift, second shift, third shift. And I might, rather than putting in an option for any shift, I might just make it first, second, or third, so I can see if somebody checks all three, they don't care when they work, type of an idea. All right. But again, most of the stuff that you do between a checkbox, oops, try that again. Most of the stuff that you do between checkboxes and radio buttons, most of the stuff that they share is pretty much the same stuff. There we go. All right. So that's pretty much it. So that is the group box control I showed you here, the list box, the combo box, the radio buttons, and the check boxes. Again, I'm trying to run through real examples of these so you've got some kind of an idea of how they look, because you are going to be using those when you do your homework and when you do your next test. Okay. So again, there's their group box example. You can check to see if something is true like this. I don't believe you need the equal true there. I think you could just say if they use RDO. I always used RAD, but I don't care which one you use. Where they've got if RDO credit card dot checked equal true. I believe all you need in there is if RDO credit card dot checked. All right. So as it says, to determine whether a radio button is checked or not, you use the check properties. Group controls are used to group together like things. All right. And they have a few things in there because it can get kind of quirky how you add stuff to a group box. But if you do it the way I showed you, you should be fine. Any radio buttons not placed within a group are considered separate from one another. So virtually, if you're going to have more than one related radio button, virtually 100% of the time, you will put it inside of a group box. If you move a group box, everything within it moves automatically as well. The tab order I'm not going to discuss. I don't think there's anything in here we haven't talked about. You can take a look through that if you're so inclined. How to get information you need for using a control. There's different ways of doing this. Unfortunately, one of the best ways of doing this I cannot show you because the software that I'm using here in Teams, all right, if I hit that key, weird things happen. But you can try this if you want to, if you don't have anything else running but Visual Studio. But I don't know with Teams if it would work for you or not. But let's say that I wanted to know more about a form, let's say a button. I can click on any one of my buttons, and up at the top of your keyboard, hopefully you can see the F1 through F12 keys. So if you click on a control and you hit the F1 key, it's supposed to bring you online help. So if we did it on a button, it should bring you the online help for buttons. All right. You can also always go out to the Microsoft documentation, as they say as well. All right. All right, this is probably, maybe you'll agree with this, maybe you won't, but probably the most interesting part of the chapter here, talking about multi-form projects. I'm going to show you this. It's not going to be a gee whiz type of thing, but I do want to show you how you can add multiple forms. All right. So I'm going to go back, change my share. I'm going to go back into the program that we were just in. And I'll tell you what, I'll leave this one here. So I'm going to do a file, save all. All right. So that was chapter 10 example. I'm going to make a new project in here. So I'm going to add a new project. It'll again be a Windows form, and it'll be chapter, let's try that again. Chapter 10, project 2. All right. So I've got a new one in here. I'm not going to worry. In fact, I will. You'll understand why in just a second. But I am going to come in here and I am going to change the back color. I'm just going to make it something that would stand out. So I'm going to make it, I'll make it yellow like I did before. All right. Now I'm going to add 4 buttons. This won't be a very, like I said, a very exciting type of program, but when we go in and do the same thing with multiple forms in a minute, it'll hopefully make more sense. So let me come in here and change my size. All right. I'm going to call this button BTN home. You'll understand why in just a second, hopefully. And I'm going to make this home. Oops. There we go. This one's going to say red. This one is going to say white. And this one is going to say blue. Just for completeness, let me change the name. So this button will be BTN blue. This button will be BTN white. This button will be, that one I did rename. This one will be BTN red. All right, pretty simple stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this. When you click this button, I want to say the name of the form, and I haven't changed the name of the form, so let's quickly do that. We'll change the name of the form, and we'll call it FRM red, white, blue. Okay. All right. So when I click that button, I want to say FRM red, white, blue dot. What is it? Is it dot? I always forget when I want to change the color. Uh, Give me a second here. No. Says there's a dot color, but that isn't the right one. So dot. There is no back default back color. That might be it. I don't know. I'm going to say here equals. It doesn't like that. So wish I'd looked at this beforehand. The idea is this. I want to reset the background color. When I click the red button, the form should be red. When I click the blue button, the form should turn blue. When I, etc. Okay. So dot. That's the default. Okay, we'll see if we can get this to work doing it this way. I'm just grabbing something from the internet here, so. Of course it doesn't. Well, what this might do is this might just change the color of the button, but you'll get the idea anyway. So I'm going to say 255, 0, 0. That'll be red. Two 255, 255, 255. And finally for blue, it'll be 0, 0, 255. All right, let me run it and see if it's actually working now. Oh, I got to change my default, my starter form. Well, it actually works, so let me show it to you. So there's red, there's white, there's blue. I didn't set up home. I could have. It's no big thing one way or the other. All right, but it all works. All right, and that's all fine. But what I want to show you is what we're going to do is I'm going to basically grab these buttons right now. Okay, and I'm going to go back into Visual Studio here. I'm going to copy all these buttons, just like this. So I'm copying. Good. Now I want to come back in here and I'm going to create 3 new forms. All right. So right now I've got just the one form and it's FRM red, white, blue. So let's right mouse click on our project, choose add, and I'm going to go down about 2/3 of the way. It says form there. All right. And what do I want? I want to give this a name. I'm going to call this FRM red. Okay. I don't care right now. I can make it red. I can do that. I can go to the background color right now and I can set it to red. Boom, it's red. Perfect. Now I'm going to paste in those buttons. Okay. And put them down about right there. Okay. Right now, they're not going to do anything. So I'm going to create another form in here. And I'm going to call this FRM white. Again, I'm going to make it white right away. And again, I'm going to add the buttons right away. All right, finally, I'm going to add one more form. And that'll be FRM blue. All right. I will make it blue and then add the buttons. All right. Now I'm going to go back to my home form in just a second, but I want you to realize, and I think you do, but if you look up on, why do I keep clicking the wrong one? There we go. That I now have in here FRM blue, FRM red, FRM red, white, blue, and FRM white. All right. And I can literally set it up now. And that's what I'm about to do is I want to set it up. So when I click on any of these buttons that it goes to the right place. Now, right now it's going to be kind of stupid to click blue when it's already blue, so I could remove that one if I wanted to. Then I could go back to the white one and remove this button. Then I could go back to the red one and remove this button, etc. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. But what I'm trying to show you, all right, this is typically how I show students multiple forms, all right, is something like this where it'll make sense to jump back and forth and do something like with color or something like that. Right now, I'm not going to run it because there's no code in there to make it do what I want it to do yet. But I wanted to show you the interface. So now let me go in because I'll probably need their code. Otherwise, I'll probably put the wrong code in there and I don't want to do that. So, all right. Most Visual Studio projects that you create of any merit whatsoever are going to have multiple forms on them. Your next test, you will have to create at least one example of something with multiple forms on it. So you just saw how to add the form. Again, we right mouse clicked on the name of the solution, chose add, and then you can either just bring up the dialog or you can choose form. Both of them bring up this dialog. All right, so those steps are explained right here. The code that's generated for a new form, not a whole heck of a lot. It depends on how you generate the form and how you create the form. All right, we'll look at that in just a moment. Renaming a form, you already know how to do that. I don't think we have to talk about that again. All right. And so they have a project in here that has two forms, but what we want to do, this is where it's important. How to display the first form of an application. All right. And what that does is it comes in, and in the file that we have that's called program.cs, we've never done anything with program.cs in a forms project. But down at the bottom here, it has application.run, and it's got, right now we've only had one form so far when we've done this. So it's been the name of the one form we have. But if we wanted this program to run and start with the red form, we could put in there FRM red. Then the first form that would run when the program started would be the red form. All right. So how to display a form as a dialog box. That's kind of cool. All right. So you can set up a form, and when you do, when you look right here, this right here, this thing that you see here, this minus sign, that's the minimize. The square here, that's the maximize, and that's the close button. And you'll notice the difference between this one and this one, not just the stuff that's in there, but this one doesn't have any of those buttons. All right, so what they've done here is they have set the maximize, the minimize, etc. Those buttons were set to false, so they wouldn't show. All right, this is the code I wanted to grab right here. All right, so I'll grab it anyways. Give me a second here. Come on. All right, sorry that took a second, but it'll be worth it hopefully in just a second. So let me jump back into my program here and let me change my share. We'll take a break in about 5 minutes. All right. Now I'm going to go back to my home here. Right. And for this red button, now I'm going to actually change something. Okay. Because I don't want it to just become red. I could do that, but that's not what I want. So I'm just going to comment that line out and I'm going to put in this. Okay. Right. Now, what's going on here? Well, there should be parens here, and that's why I'm getting those errors. Okay. And something's goofed up here, but we'll fix it in a second. All right. What I'm doing here is I'm creating a new instance of my red form. Okay. And this should be showing it, but for some reason it doesn't like that. Let me quickly check the screen here. Oh, it's a capital S, which is why it's giving me the error. Okay. So what I want to tell it to do is I want to tell it to hide the current form. So I say this dot close, and that should hide the current form. This is creating a new instance of the red form, and this is showing that instance. All right. So I'm going to grab all three of these lines. Oops. And again, I'll comment out this, and I'm going to comment out this. And now I'm going to paste in this, and I'm going to say white form equals new FRM white, and white form dot show dialog. And finally, I'm going to put in here the same kind of thing, but with blue. No, didn't like that. So grab that. And it will be blue form. You can call this whatever you want. Equals new blue and blue form. Now, I'm going to do the rest during the break, but just so you see this in action, so to speak. All right, I'm going to do a file, save all. I'm going to run this. Let me change my share. All right, and now when I click red, didn't like something. Oh, I did that. Well, it's 10:08. Let's take till 10:20. We'll take a break. I'm going to fix this. All right. And I will also take this whole thing that I've done today in chapters 9 and, or I guess in chapter 10, and I'll put this out as a GitHub repository. So again, take a break, come back at 10:20, and we'll finish this up, please. All right, sorry about that. What I did, because I wanted to make sure that we had time for this. Grant, can you see on your screen now, it is the screen that's up there, the form, is it purple?
I do not see you sharing
All
anything
right,
right
then
now.
let me do it again. And I'll tell you real quickly then what I did. Now do you see a purple screen?
Yes.
Okay. I pulled the project out that I created last year that was like this, just so we've got a finished project. All right. And what I want to show you the code that's in here. So notice what we're doing here. It's the same thing that I just showed you every time. So we hide the current form. All right. We create an instance of the new form, and then we make that new form active. And we're doing the same thing. This is the red one. The thing with white is exactly the same. I just put comments here and I didn't put the comments in here. But again, we're hiding it. We're creating a new form and we're showing it. We're hiding it. We're creating a new form and we're showing it. All right. So let me run this. And I again, you're an intelligent person. I'm sure that it makes sense to you what's going on, but I just want to show this to you in action. And what I will do is I will fix up the other one that I have and this one so they'll both be out there when I put this out there for my GitHub repo. So let me do that. And let me run this. Now let me change my share because we're almost done with the chapter, I believe. All right, so you should see a purple form right now. Now it's red. And notice I did remove the red, so now it's white. I remove the white, now it's blue. I can jump back to the main. Well, I should be able to, but I can
I
go,
only see a black screen right now.
all right, then let me show it again. Let me do it again. Let me stop the run and start the run again. Okay. And then I will change my share accordingly. All right. Well, this will be interesting because I have not had to do this before with a share. And it's possible when I go from form to form that the share won't keep up. I don't know. You see the purple form on your screen right now.
Yes, I do.
When I click this, do you now see the red form on your screen right now?
No, now it's a black screen.
Yeah. So Teams must not have the ability. I just clicked the red button. So let me reset my share here for you. And now that's what the form looks like. So you should see red now, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, but I think you get it well enough that you can understand what's going on here. All right. I will have a working copy that I will put in there so that everybody can look at it by the end of the period today. Okay. All right. Let me go back. Like I said, we didn't have that much to do, but I actually got a call from somebody at Rankin about a different student in your class, and that's what I was attending to, and that's why I was a little late in getting back here. All right. Okay. So magic code is here on page 321. So if there's anything that you need to grab or to be cognizant of, it's that little bit of code that you see right here. Code that creates and displays a custom dialog box. But again, you will have an example, just so you know that. Next is how to pass data between a form. Yeah, you can do that. Guess what? Remember that tag? We've used the tag property. All right, you can do that and you can use that to send information back and forth. All right. The message box class, everything that's in there, I looked at it. We've talked about it already. You've done every bit of that stuff. I don't know why they waited until this late in the book to go and introduce that. I mean, that's 325 pages in, but they did. All right. Now, I may have mentioned this to you in earlier lectures. I may not have. I don't know. But when you talk about different events for the form, there is both a form closing event, ing, and a form closed event, ed. The difference between those is if I put code in the form closing event, let's say that I didn't want a user to ever be able to close a form for whatever reason. Then in the form closing event, I could put a check in there that said, if you try to click a button or do this to close the form, just disallow it. But if I put it in the closed event, now the form's already closed. So you use the closing event a lot of times to cancel an operation or to make sure something doesn't happen. And that's what they're showing here. It says the form contains unsaved data. Do you want to save it? Well, what they're doing here is they're just basically saying, hey, you're about to close the form. You're going to lose whatever it is you were working on. If you click yes, and I don't even know if they actually put the regular code in here, but something will happen so you can save the form. If you say no, what you're basically saying is, no, I don't want to save it. So as it says here, you know, it's an event handler. We've put some code in the form's load event, but this is almost the equivalent of an unload event. All right. You probably won't, I don't know if we're going to really be doing that much with that, but it's a good thing that you do know it. So the chapter, it says, ends by showing you this thing right here. Okay. And it's kind of cool the way they've got this set up. What do I mean? Well, right here, when you choose credit card, you get this screen. But when you choose bill customer, you get this screen. You can say they're the same screen. Definitely not. Because when you choose bill customer, the list box gets grayed out, so it's disabled. The text box gets grayed out, so it's disabled. And the two drop downs, all right, both of those are grayed out. So what you're able to do, for lack of better words, is some double duty. Now, hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you. All right. And as it says, it's two different versions. Okay. Now, you've got a customer form on here, but when you select, so this would be a form that would come up. You could choose from different customers. Okay. Then you click select payment. And when you select payment, which one of these comes up will depend on which one of these is checked. So what we're building towards is eventually to have a database. We're going to have, for lack of better words, kind of like a file that'll have a list of customers in it. And when you choose a customer, it'll pre-populate that customer's information. And when you click select payment, if that customer is chosen to pay by credit card, this will come up. And if that customer is chosen to pay by being billed, this will show up. All right. And that's pretty much what they're saying in here. Now, right now, we're faking it because we haven't talked about databases yet. So as it says, the application doesn't actually save data, but in a production, it would be saved to a database or a file. All right, files are still used today, but more often than not, files are used as input to databases. In fact, what we might do, what I'm thinking of doing right now, is at the end of next week, instead of going on and going into chapter 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, which we are going to do, doing chapter 17 next and just showing you how to use files. And then we wouldn't even be tested on it. I'm not going to give you any homework from it, no written test, no nothing. But we just spend one period doing that so you could understand how you can save things to files. I think that might be helpful. All right. So the rest of the chapter here shows you the code. So they show you how to set up the customer form, how to set up the payment form. All right. There's just one payment form. All right. But again, these radio buttons, depending on which one is chosen, the combo boxes may be maybe enabled or maybe disabled. All right. The drop downs, etc., all that stuff. So they go through the code that's in here. All right. And I think that rather than doing that, it's good code. I mean, I could sit there and talk until for the next hour and a half, talk till noon, and we probably wouldn't even get a super good understanding of it. So instead, what I want to do with you, and give me a second here, because this will necessitate a screen share in just a second. I'll have to change my share. So let's see. We'll just look at this. This will be fine. All right, so let me change my share here. Now, I have not looked at the homework. I have not looked at the labs for chapters 9 and 10. I'm just being honest with you. So it says here for chapter 9, we've got calculate reservation totals. All right. I don't think that's going to be a big thing one way or the other. The other one is work with strings. We're either probably going to do 9-1 or 9-2 together as a class. We'll do that sometime next week. But for chapter 10, they've got this convert lengths. All right. It says you'll code a form that converts the value the user enters based on a conversion type. So it's a simple drop down right here. I don't think that's very difficult either. This one is much more difficult. All right. Why? Because you have to build this. And as you can see, we've got a group box here. Am I right in assuming, Grant, that you can see up here where it says extra 10-2 process lunch orders?
Yes.
Okay. So we've got a group box that says main course, and we've got 3 radio buttons. Then we've got a group box that has 3 different drop downs. I'm sorry, 3 different check boxes. And then we've got another group box that has 3 labels in it and 3 text boxes. So you fill all this up. So hopefully they did it right here. This is 695 plus 75 plus 75. So 695 and 150 is 845. If we assume tax, and I think tax is 8%, something like that, it's 65 cents. We add the two, we get the total here. Now, hopefully that all makes sense. Now, what they ask you to do in 10.2 is to create this. Then in 10.3, they have you add a second form. So when you click change percent, it brings up this where you can change the tax rate. It's very simple. So right now it looks like 7.975. If I change that to 10, for example, and click OK, then with this subtotal of $202, 10% added onto that would be what, $20.25 type of an idea. All right. So probably we'll end up doing 10.3 as a class. I'll show you how to set up 10.2, and then we'll do 10.3. All right. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
I think that'll make more sense. So this is the plan for tomorrow's lab. All right. And between now and 11:55, I'm going to fix that program so that it works, that All American one. I'm going to use the one that I was doing with you, but I'll fix it so it works. I will send out the email that I always send out at the end of each class period that has the URL for everything, and it'll have a GitHub repo. Tomorrow will be lab. Monday, I will go over chapter 11, which is on debugging. We should be able to get through that whole program in an hour. I don't think there'll be any problem with that. All right. Then when we get done with that, I'll probably end up building this one, 10.3, and then I'm going to look at the chapter 9 and the chapter 10 labs. All right. I don't know if we have time, ideally, we could go over chapter 11, then do this problem, and then do one or two problems, maybe one problem from the chapter 9 labs, one problem from the chapter 10 labs. Then Tuesday of next week will be lab for the entire period. That's all I want to go up to, and we'll see where we are exactly right then and there. All right. Again, not so much for you because I said this earlier, but I'm saying it again. I have tried to get as up to date now as I can with the grading for everyone. There's a couple people I'm still working on, and I may not have put the stuff in there in the book yet, but hopefully with the rest of you by the end of the day today, everything will be updated. All right. So if you have questions or if you think, hey, why'd you take off on this or whatever, I did yesterday grade both the chapter 6-7 test you took last week and the chapter 8 test you took yesterday. All right. I'm going to send you an email today that's going to have basically a copy of the test page and how many points you got for each thing. And again, I believe I've mentioned this previously, but I want to say it again. And that is if you lost points, if your logic was wrong, you lost points. Okay. But for instance, you were told to do things like change the name of the form text here, set a cancel button, set an accept button, set a tab order, use meaningful names, etc. All right. If you didn't do one or more of those things, you lost some points as well. All right. So again, tomorrow will be lab. We'll pick it up again with chapter 11 on Monday. Have a good weekend. I'll talk to you then. Thanks.
Thanks, you too.